I'm Erin Freeman. I'm Artistic Director of the City Choir of Washington.
And I am Victoria Gau. I'm Artistic Director of Cantate, Chamber Singers, and Concert Choir.
Oh, we are so excited because we are both hitting the Magnificats hard this November and December, right? So I'm doing Bach E-flat Magnificat with the City Choir of Washington. And which ones are you doing?
I am doing Vivaldi, Arneson, and Donkin Magnificats on December 2nd with Cantate.
So, I was thinking about this the other day, that, for large ensembles, masses and requiems are the go-to for big choral works, and Magnificats sort of get the short end of the stick, I think. Why did you choose Magnificat?
I find this text to be fascinating. I find it to be really, really compelling. Kind of revolutionary has always been my take on it, and I'm so fascinated about the way different composers look at it and what it might mean to them. I don't know, what about you?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it gives me great hope. I think it's a text that's been around for a long time, and in the case of Bach, he references, music of well before his time throughout it, and so there's some sense that it's connecting us to previous generations, which always reminds me that we'll be able to connect this to future generations, so there's sort of a little bit of hope built in there, but I appreciate the implicit instructions in it. The feed the poor, the uplift the humble. Those reminders, I think, are really important these days, and it's nice to know that they were important back in Bach's time and in Vivaldi's time as well, and all the way back to Martin Luther, and even before that with the original Greek. It's nice to know that the problems we're having now are kind of universal in terms of the history. Yeah,
that sense that strength can come to the most humble of us.
Yeah,
is hope is a fantastic word.
Yeah,
Erin, I think that's great.
I also like that it's the text of a woman. It's the Song of Mary, right? Yes. And I think that's important to share.
Yeah.
So you have a female composer.
I do.
In your list.
I do. Christine Donkin is a Canadian composer. And
I've never heard of her.
I hadn't heard of her either. I decided I wanted to do a Magnificat concert.
Yeah.
And it's really important to me to represent women composers as much as possible. So I'm just sort of digging around, and I came upon this piece and was absolutely floored. It is this wonderful little crystallized miniature. It's about 6 minutes long.
Okay.
Solo, mezzo, soprano, 10 different vocal parts for treble voices, so sopranos and altos, that just echo notes of this chanted line that's sung by the mezzo soprano, creating this kind of really, really gorgeous oral landscape, and it's very, very meditative. She had this idea of composing it. Actually, I emailed her for her thoughts about it. She was saying, when I wrote this piece, I was imagining that the singers would actually walk a labyrinth while singing it. But my teacher, she said she was in the middle of her master's, she said, my teacher told me not to do that because it wasn't practical. I said, thank you for that.
Well, maybe it musically walks the labyrinth, and that's the joy of music, is that it means that you don't have to have your choir necessarily processing in and out for the piece, because
exactly,
you can do that through the music of it. Yeah. So is there a certain part of the text that she is highlighting through it? Is there a certain aspect of it, the glorification of, or the humility
really,
of it?
For her idea, as opposed to, what I know you're finding in Bach and what you see in Vivaldi and the Arneson, for her idea, I think, is more just a general meditative state on anything. If I were to come up with descriptors, I would say a sense of quiet wonder she finds in it, which is really, very different from all those trumpets and everything at the beginning of the Bach. Huh?
Yeah. The Bach sort of starts in this blaze of glory. And one of the things I love about it is that throughout, Bach has such a variety of colors, though. So it starts with 3 trumpets and 2 oboes and your timpani, and the kitchen sink is probably in there as well. But then throughout you get a movement with just the strings. You get a movement with solo oboe and solo singer with just the cello, bass, and organ accompaniment. You get one of the most beautiful is the Sushapit Israel, which is for treble voices, and the violins and violas play the continuo line. So no cellos and basses are allowed in this particular movement. It's stunning. And
Great way of putting it.
And then the other one is the movement with 2 recorders, and there's only one movement with 2 recorders, and that's the one where the text talks about feeding the hungry, and there's something so personal about that and so intimate about that sound, the sound of the recorders compared to the oboes and the trumpets and all of that, and the timpani. It's very intimate, and I almost liken it to the humility that's required when to wash your neighbor's feet, and to feed the hungry. It's so personal, and so I think we think of Bach as this grand trumpet-ridden piece, but that's only a few times throughout it. He really is able to grasp the text through a variety of different colors throughout.
And what's really interesting, thinking in terms of the Vivaldi and the Bach, because they were contemporaries, really, is even writing and working in the same time period, how each of them kind of related to the text slightly differently and found different moments to highlight. I mean, once we start talking about he has, the power and all that sort of stuff, everybody gets big and strong, right? For the Vivaldi, for instance, the moment to what you're referring to, the Bach would be the Et Misericordia. It gets just this sort of beautifully kind of suspended state. But where Bach makes this huge, amazing movement of the Omnis Generationes, or what are you doing, German or Latin?
Austro-Germanic Latin.
Good. Omnis Generationes, and boom, they just come in going one after the other. That text is stuck right in the middle of a mostly solo movement by Vivaldi, but the soloist goes omnis, and then the entire chorus goes omnis, and then the soloist keeps going. And then there's a little short thing, but it's such a, something that Bach really, really looked to build as his way of saying, going on and on and on and on.
That trick that Vivaldi used, Bach had a trick as well in the Omnis Generationes, actually. So, the omnes meaning all, so the whole chorus comes in. In the Bach version, what he does is it's imitative.
Yep.
So every voice part comes in with the omnes generatio. And there are 2 places in this very short movement where he builds up a scale. So it's G, A, B flat, C, and he goes from G all the way up to G. As if to represent all generations. He does the entire scale all in a row. And so there are these little tricks like that that happen throughout the Magnificat. And I think the only problem with it is that you blink and they're gone, because it's so pithy. It's such a perfect little concise work in only 30 minutes and however many movements. I don't know how many movements it is, but 12, 13 minutes, 16 movements in 30 minutes. And
it's not much time.
These little tricks, they go by quickly.
Yeah.
Makes you really need to stay in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of interesting. The other thing, the piece for us that we're doing is this Kim André Arneson.
And who's that?
Magnificent. So he's another contemporary.
All right.
So Kim André Andersen is another contemporary composer. He's Norwegian.
Okay.
And has a lot of really, really beautiful choral music. And this Magnificat is for solo soprano and chorus. And he very much takes this sense of wonder and humility and really, really expands on it. And I have a cat on my lap now.
Yes.
So with Arneson, the one thing that's really, really interesting is the one sort of high energy movement that he has is the Feci Potentiam, which Church Latin, because Arneson, because he's not Germanic.
So you're not doing Norwegian Latin.
I decided to avoid going there. But so you get into this movement, and where so much of what's been happening has been this beautifully drawn out sense of wonder and awe. Then all of a sudden he gets really peppy, and mixed meters and all this stuff. But in spite of the, off the strings, this is mainly string orchestra for the most part. In spite of this, real bouncy string accompaniment and the tempo and the words, that he shows strength and so forth and so on, he writes with humbleness, as the little tempo description at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So I'm still kind of working on that one.
Yeah,
So but I think it's that. I think for him, what he's not trying to lean into is any kind of pugilistic, big kind of heavy strength that maybe some other composers might have leaned into, with the idea of amazement and wonder, and not so not wanting to be too me-centered in the text. But it's really, really fascinating to look at these different settings and see what did it mean to the different composers and how did they put it into music.
Yeah.
This is something I only pick up on from a when I'm really diving into it and looking at each individual composer. But one composer sometimes composers will leave out little bits of the text. I don't know if Bach did. For instance, Arneson leaves out Es Orientes and Plevig Bonis, etc., and Bach doesn't.
Correct. Correct. Bach includes that.
Vivaldi doesn't, but Vivaldi leaves out another little teeny part of the text, which is
Bach's
interesting.
is pretty complete.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're actually doing the E flat version
that's really
of the Magnificat, which is the original. So when most people do Bach's Magnificat, they do the D major version, and we're doing the original, which was written in 1723, right about the same time when he got his last job, the one at Thomas Kirche in Leipzig, and that's the job where he composed so much music and all his cantatas and solidified his place in history. Right. So he wrote this one for Christmas time, and it's actually a little different. He didn't just transpose it down to D major, however, 9 years later. He actually changed it a little bit. So for the original version, he adds to the Magnificat text for Christmas text. We have a Gloria in Excelsis, we have a Freut euch und jubiliert, so rejoice and be happy. We have a Von Himmel hoch, which is based on the original Martin Luther hymn.
Chorale, yeah.
And then we have a Virga Jesse about the tree of life, and that goes into an Alleluia. And so it's really interesting to see this message that is in the Magnificat about uplifting the humble and casting down the proud through the lens of the Christmas story. Because I think, particularly these days, our Christmases are filled with more and more, and also some more. And so to celebrate Christmas through this this poem of Mary's, which
celebrating humility.
Celebrating humility, I think is really important. So actually what we've done to pair with this is I've taken the 4 Christmas interpolations and I've paired them for the first half of our concert with a cappella works that have similar texts similar meanings. So the Virga Jesse that's in the Bach here, we're doing the Bruckner motet. For the Gloria in Excelsis Deo, we're doing the Jan Sandström Gloria. He's a Swedish composer. And to pair with the Von Himmel hoch, we're doing the Swedish Christmas Carol that is based on the original Lutheran tune, but then was rewritten a couple of times and then arranged about 15 years ago by Eva Toller. Little known fact, Bach received a diamond ring from the Prince of Sweden. So we could, call
So
that
there's your
connection. And then for the Freut euch und jubiliert, the rejoice and celebrate, we're kind of stretching it a little bit by doing the Bogorodice Dievo
Oh wow.
of Rachmaninoff, because it's a Rachmaninoff
It's a
year.
worthwhile stretch.
And the Rachmaninoff, of course, is a celebration or an homage to Mary. And since this is a song of Mary, I kind of think it makes sense to do the Rachmaninoff. And it's so beautiful, so we just had to do it. So, and then we're ending the first half with Elaine Hagenberg's Alleluia, which is part of the Virga Jesse text. But what I love about that is that she also adds text to it that goes all the way back to the 4th century to St. Augustine.
Oh, cool.
So our concert really spans 2,000 years of text and music.
This is one of the things that's so fun about being a choral conductor, right? Is to be able to not only look for those musical connections, but to look for those textual and philosophical connections between all the pieces, which, you know, you've clearly done such a great job. I actually have one piece on my concert that is not a Magnificat.
What?
Can you believe it? And it's the Ola Yelo Song of the Universal.
Okay, and what? How does that relate to the Magnificat?
It's that word universal.
Yeah.
To me, that whole connection between the universality of the Magnificat text, if you will. So once again, perhaps a little bit of a stretch, but this idea, right? This idea of, you know, sing me the song universal, this wonderful Whitman text, and I just thought it was a really interesting pairing with the Magnificat. Also happened to work really well with the orchestra that I'm going to have, so it was sort of a match made in heaven, as it were.
I mean, there are the logistical things. So let me ask you a little bit. I mean, we're sitting here and we're celebrating Magnificats, and I am not a particularly religious person, but I can find deep solace and deep comfort and deep sort of inspiration from this text. And so when we're presenting these pieces, I think it's important to make sure we understand that it is not a religious experience necessarily. It's a human experience. And so for Bach, those two were the same. So for him, the religious experience was the human experience. But for so many of us, it is truly a lesson that transcends sort of the religious experience. And how do you reconcile doing 3 Magnificats on a concert that is not necessarily a religious concert?
Exactly. So this is a really interesting thing for me in working with the body of work that we have to work with as choruses. You know, you mentioned requiems and masses as being such a large part of the large choral work. And just like with any of these other principally or originally religious texts, the value to me is looking at how did the composer engage with this text? What did engaging with this text mean to him or her? And how did that translate into the musical experience? And it's fascinating. You know, if I had worlds enough in time, I'd be thrilled to do a concert with, 4 requiems in a row. Nobody would sit through it, mind you, but it's the same thing. Just where people find that the meaning in the text. And for audiences, there's still ways of looking at the text and taking it out of the original context and seeing where they find the power in it, and they're seeing it through the lens of the composers. Which is really cool. Yeah,
I mean, I go back to the movement with the recorders, for example, and I'm looking for it here in my score. But because that's such a special sound for Bach, and it's such a unique sound right in the middle of this piece, it's so clear that text means something very special to him. So, if it's the esurientes, which is the hungry, he is filled with good things. And, so I keep going back to that, and I keep going, so what is Bach trying to say through this.
Isn't there something really cool in the last measure?
Oh yeah,
That
it's so charming.
Oh my gosh.
So here it is. So this is fascinating. So the whole text of this movement with the two recorders is he has filled the hungry with good things, and he has sent the rich away empty-handed. All right. So at the very end, the recorders have this phrase. You have da 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 da, and then just the continuo finishes, and the recorders do not. And the Bach has left the recorders empty-handed.
I get chills just
I mean,
thinking about it.
it's
So
unbelievable
cool.
what he's done there.
So cool.
And they're little things like that too. So it's, I mean, in one way, it's he treats this text with reverence. But then in the other way, there are little moments of humor or cleverness that you can latch onto as this kind of intellectually fascinating exercise. I mean, it has everything in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the whole human experience right here. In this score. No, I mean, you know, Brahms would say, "Study Bach; it teaches you everything."
Yeah.
That's a paraphrase, but yeah. Who are your soloists?
My soprano soloist is Jennifer Casey Cabot.
Oh yeah,
Wonderful soprano soloist who I've known for many years. And then our mezzo soloist is Magdalena Vore, who I've worked with a good handful of times at National Philharmonic and other places, and she's marvelous. She's just truly marvelous. And then the poor lower voice soloist who don't get tons and tons of time, but the time they get is just like delightful and delight in miniature in the Vivaldi. A wonderful tenor who's new to town, John Logan Wood. And our baritone soloist is this fabulous young artist who was actually our first cantate young artist of color, Anthony Anderson, who is like at the beginning of a star career. I'm absolutely convinced. So we're so lucky to have him.
He came to Wintergreen.
Oh, great.
Was a student at VCU for a little bit before he went off to Oberlin. Yeah. Oh, he's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
A delightful musician, a fabulous artist, and a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
You know, just the whole package, which is
That's
great. Who have you got?
We have Laura Choi Stewart.
Oh my gosh, I just performed with her this weekend.
Oh,
I adore
what
Laura.
a beautiful voice. She's actually going to do both of the soprano parts. And then the Susepi Israel will be a trio from within the chorus. We have Jana Kreitz, and I got to know Jana a while ago when I was working with the Richmond Symphony and conducting Mozart Requiem, and she was my soloist, my mezzo soloist for that performance. Tenor Oliver Mercer. And then bass is Justin Harrison, who I heard during a set of auditions through DC Strings.
Oh, cool.
So I heard lots of singers, and he was one of the singers. He's a graduate of the University of Maryland Opera Studio.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So
fantastic.
I'm really excited. And then some of the small group things within the Bach, as I said, the Giuseppe Israel, and then some of the Christmas interpolations will be performed by small groups from within City Choir Washington.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then our orchestra is marvelous. Marvelous. I'm really excited.
Yeah. I am always thrilled with the orchestras that we end up with a cantate. So it's just it's such a joy to be able to work with them.
I kind of think that any concert, but particularly one where there's a text that demands caring for your fellow humans, and a musical setting that is so glorious. I think every human deserves an hour and a half to sit in a beautiful space, to be inspired by humans that have been working for months, for years on their craft, and to give yourself that time to reflect. Like, we don't do that often enough.
No.
We don't do that often enough.
No.
And that's a little meta, but I feel like that's what someone gets.
And I think,
is a gift for themselves.
oh, such a gift.
Yeah.
Such a gift. And to be able to do it, to be able to dip in twice in one season is amazing. And the beauty of doing this in two different contexts is just the nature of the works between the Bach and these other works. You and I have similar but very different orchestras. I mean, it becomes markedly different when you start adding the trumpets and the, and the recorders and stuff for the Bach. So that he's able to highlight things in one way, and then, if you're looking at Artisan or the Donkin, the a cappella one, that's another way of fully experiencing this text. So if you really, really want to experience the full spectrum of this text, you gotta come to both.
You gotta come to both.
You just gotta.
Yeah.